Alright, so let's throw the next thing. It's a pretty big lump of clay. Usually when you've got a big wad like this, you want to make sure you sort of slap it into a good shape and then really just push it down. Centering this will be a little bit harder because it's a little bigger. So it might take a little bit longer, so be sure to be patient. It's going to be real tempting to use a lot of water. Try to sort of not give in to that urge, because the water's not going to be your friend if you use too much of it. So just enough to sort of moisten it and just get a little bit in your palm. Just enough to make the clay move up and down like you want it to. We don't need it to be like fully saturated. Make sure you keep your hands clean. So I'm throwing a bowl, and with bowls, the opposite of what you want to do with cylinders is going to be true. So with bowls, you want to center low and wide, and ideally as wide as you want your bowl to be. So think about how big of a bowl you want and make sure that that centered block sort of reflects that. So just like with the cylinder, you're going to open it up with your bat wings. Just leave a little bit of a divot. I like to pull it all the way to the edge and then push through very lightly. And it's going to be very important here that you definitely double check and make sure that that centerpiece is thick enough for you to trim properly. So we want to make sure we've got a lot. I've got a little extra material than I'd like there, so I think I can go down a little bit farther. You can always go farther, but you can't go thicker. So err on the side of caution here and just make sure you've got enough material to trim with later. So every time you add water, you should always remember to try to take a little water away. It's not about saturation, it's about even moisture, because if we've got even moisture, it's going to be easier to complete these throws and these pulls than it will be to not do it. So think about that, and just like with the cylinder, you want to start at the bottom until your fingers meet and then pull up together, where you want even pressure all the way around. Uneven pressure is going to give you bad shapes. And every time you make a move, you always want to go back and sort of compress that rim, because if you compress your rim, it'll keep it from getting a little crazy. And if you do happen to get a crazy rim, what you can do is you can take your needle tool and just hold it level and cut off that edge and start fresh. Just make sure you compress where you've taken off. Now it might look like my whole hand is in there, but the only thing touching the clay is actually my pointer finger. So the rest of those fingers are just in there as support. They are not, in fact, touching any clay. Right now I'm using my fettling knife to sort of measure the height. Most fettling knives are about 5-6 inches tall. That's about as tall as we want a bowl, a good size ramen bowl, to be. So I'm going to pull one more, and this time I'm going to go out ever so slightly as I pull. I'm going to pull it a little wider. Take out that moisture, and you can reuse the moisture that you take out from the inside on the outside. It doesn't have to be like always from the bucket. You can just recycle water from the whole pot. And that's a good way to sort of control your moisture. If you just use the moisture that already exists in the peas, then you don't have to worry about getting extra. So we are shaping our pot, and I'm going to use my round rib. We've already sort of made it a little round, but we're going to make it even rounder. And with this particularly, we want to just think about pushing out with our inside hand. So with our outside hand, it's really about going up when we push, and with our inside hand, it's going to be about going out. Now notice how flared my rim got. That's because my rim is a little bit thin. So I've got to pay attention to that as I'm throwing. There's a lot of moisture on that rim, so I really need to be aware of that and be careful. Don't try to shape your bowl with one hand. Feel free to take any extra slip off with that one hand, but like always think about even pressure when you make shapes. When you're going to move or push or pull, you always want to have slightly evened out pressure. And what I'm doing right now is I'm just cleaning up the bottom of that bowl so it's nice and even. And this is not bad. This is a pretty wide bowl, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm looking for my wooden knife. Try your best not to leave your tools in your bucket because you will regret it. So I'm just going to take off that excess material. That's important because it's going to help me trim it later. If I don't take off that excess material, it's going to be significantly harder to trim these pieces. I'm just cleaning up an edge. Taking off a little more material because I just want my wire tool or my knife to sort of just slide through like butter. So always add a little bit of water, just a little puddle of water on your bat before you cut it through. This is going to allow for a really nice, clean, even cut versus just trying to take it off as is. Sometimes your wire tool or your knife will get stuck. If you have that water will aid in slicing. So I'm using my fettling knife, and the way that works is pretty simple. You just push the blade flush against the bat just like that and just slide it underneath until the piece starts to move like so. And then what I will do is I will push it to the edge of my bat and I will take it over to my board where I will just ever so slightly nudge it onto the board. That will, let me keep reusing the bat, but also it'll help me dry the piece out faster and more evenly, because the bat's gonna make the bottom dry out slower and the top dry out faster. So if you were to leave it on the bat, you'd have a really brittle, dry top and a sort of wetter bottom. And if we take it off the bat, it's gonna dry a little more evenly because we can flip it over after the top starts to get leather hard. That way we can, change up the airflow. So I'm just cleaning up a little bit. I've got a lot of slip here in my splash pan. I'm going to take out all this extra clay that's down here, all this excess water, and I'm probably getting my water's getting a little dirty, so I'm probably going to go ahead and just take that out as well. When you go to clean up your space, this is a really nice way to do it without getting water everywhere. This is my secret. I used to be pretty messy when it came to this, and I would just have to clean forever. So tricks of the trade, learn from me. Take out the majority of the water before you take your splash pan off. And if your water starts getting sort of thick and almost like cake batter, like very thick slip, go ahead and change it out. Dump that in the trimmings bucket. Don't dump all your little clay bits into the sink. We don't want those going down the sink. Put them in the trimmings bucket, because we can reuse all this. All of this will, dehydrate and become usable clay, but if it goes down the sink, I can't get it back, and it really just clogs up the sink. We've got traps, but ideally it's just not a good idea to throw clay down the sink. Cool. So fresh water, clean hands. We love it. We love it. Okay, so let's grab a clean bat and let's get started on whatever's next. So on this bat, if you'll remember from lecture, there are holes on the back, and then there are the bat pins on the wheel head, which is what's connected to the actual wheel. You want to line up those holes on the back of your bat to your wheel head, and the best way to do it is look about the length of that, line it up with the edges of the splash pan, and there should be sets of dots on either side of that bat that sort of let you have a visual guide of where to put it. And if you'll get it onto one bat pin, you can usually rotate it till it gets on the next one. So slap that clay on the wheel pretty hard and then push it down. And now we're going to start centering, just like I showed you. Fingertips and palms of your hand. Your right arm, if you're right-handed, is going to be your muscle. Your left hand is going to be your support and your finessing hand. So remember that when we go to work on things. And your clay shouldn't be too terribly difficult to center. If it is becoming difficult and it's strenuous, your clay might be a little bit too dry, or maybe you're putting stress on your body in an unneeded way. So what I'm pointing to right here is sort of like a fly off. If your clay is like super wet, it's gonna try to like just slide up and down the bat. So really pay attention to moisture levels. If you're putting too much water into something, it's just gonna be one big slip pancake on your wheel, and that's not helpful. We don't want that. So that's a pretty good shape. I think we're going for a cylinder here. So use your bat wings and open up your clay. And then from there, use your pointer fingers and open even farther. The best way to keep your rim from getting crazy, like it almost got a little crazy, is just to make sure you compress it. And all you've got to do that is pinch it ever so slightly between your two fingers, and then put your pointer finger from your opposite hand on top of it. Just like that. Even up that moisture. And go from the very bottom till your fingers meet, and then move those hands together. With cylinders, it is important that when you go to pull, your right hand is going to want to push inward a little bit, because the wheel, the natural inclination of the wheel is to pull everything outward, so it's going to want to just flare out, but we've got to sort of fight that